Hello, hello, everybody. I have a special guest with us today as our Changemaker. She is as bright in her approach to her work as her face looks today, and her name is Allison Buehner. Allison is the Strategic Communications Director of Burning Soul Press. And I know Allison from personal interaction because she was the person who helped with PR on my book, Lighting the Path. And she has made such a resounding difference to me that I needed to really highlight her to you and help us to learn from her, for those of us who can do with some help in improving our communications and our PR. So at Burning Soul Press, Allison helps authors who have a big message to reach their dreams through PR support. And she works to elevate the Burning Soul Press brand to help those with an impactful story to get that story out. She has worked in the PR sphere in various industries for her entire career. And here's the amazing bit, because she looks rather young, but she's solid in terms of her experience. Allison is the vice chair of the Association for Women in Communication. She's a member of the Loyola University Impact Leaders 2020 cohort, and she's a former co-chair of the Chicagoland chapter of Commerce. The Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leaders Program. Allison, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Marsha. I'm so excited for this discussion.
Allison, I'm sure that there's so much more to your story, but you did me a favor and you gave me this little bite-sized bio. What else about you would we benefit from hearing if I were to ask you, tell me a little bit about your background and what has led you to be doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background was pretty, I would say, kind of humble. I came from a very small town in rural central Illinois, population 2,000. So, after I graduated from high school there, I went to college at Illinois State University to get my degree. And I definitely had culture shock. I mean, there were so many new people and experiences. And I thought to myself, I am never going back to that little cornfield town. And so I moved to Chicago, which is like the third largest city in the US. And it's been incredible. So, I'm really, grateful for the opportunities I've had and various accomplishments I've been able to achieve. But I had humble beginnings from a small town. So I think that that's definitely worth noting.
So when you come from a small town background and then you move to extremely big companies to serve on teams that are so high flying, because the last job you were at Comcast, I remember.
Yeah.
Comcast is huge. So, I mean, when I teach my students about strategy and about diversification and about horizontal scope, places like Comcast are the big daddies that we want to use as the examples. So how did you adapt from coming from the business experience you had in a small town setting to moving to a multi-dimensional company like that?
Yeah, so coming from a small town, I mean, the move to Chicago was huge. But my first job in the city was actually at a really small public relations and public affairs firm. And so that was a very small company. And I would almost venture to say that at the time it was smaller than Burning Soul Press is. And Burning Soul Press is new, so we're still kind of small too. So I had a bit of that small community there. And once I reached the point, about a year and a half in, I realized, I wasn't learning and growing as much as I needed to. And I wanted to have more of a challenge. So I did take that job at Comcast. And to answer your question, I mean, it was a bit of a whirlwind. to go from just a small team setup where you know everybody pretty intimately, to go to a large company where you have all of these different hierarchies and kind of ways that you present yourself in a larger company. And it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I can only say good things about Comcast, but it was entirely different. And so, I had to do a lot of learning about, presenting yourself professionally internally within your company. I think everybody as a professional learns how to present themselves to clients and customers and people externally, but you have to do that internally as well at a big company. So that was definitely something that I had to work through.
Right. And I know they would have a lot more of a structured succession plan there.
Yeah.
And a lot of very well manicured job descriptions and everything,
Mm-hmm.
because each person has a task and a job, and you have to really stick to your area and your mandate.
Yes, absolutely. So at such a large company, I mean, you have corporate headquarters, and then you have regional, or you have divisions of the company or divisions of the country that are broken down to the various different regions. So like central, and like Pacific, like the West, and then you have the South. And then within that, they have different regions. So I was just a part of the Chicago region
Okay.
of Comcast. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a set way of doing things and how they set up the corporate structure and job descriptions and what your opportunities are. And there were a lot of opportunities within Comcast to move around. So it was nice. I was told often that if you're willing to move, there's a lot of opportunities, because you can go through different regions and in different divisions and to corporate. So it was interesting.
Okay. So that would have shaped you with a really big kind of vision, because you would have absorbed by osmosis so many of the elements from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure you're coming into Burning Soul now as their strategic communications director, as their first strategic communications director.
Yeah.
Like overflowing with ideas. That's what I'm expecting is your situation.
Yeah.
So to the extent that you can share with us, what are some of the big things that if somebody's starting a small business, or if somebody's in a small or medium business, and for us here in the Caribbean, medium might mean small to you. Okay. What would be maybe some of the main things that they should be focusing on as they try to really max out their PR effect and their communications effect?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And so I definitely have several tips for starting and small and medium-sized businesses. Something that, and some of my tips might bleed a little bit into marketing as well, just because marketing and PR really go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is one of the most important things is to make sure that you have your branding. So branding is very important. You want to have social media, you want to have it on your website, and you want everything about your company to be branded well, and you want it to look cohesive. So I would say step one is really just having a good branding strategy. Another thing is to leverage free PR. So, for those businesses that are just starting out, you're not going to have a bunch of funds to invest in advertising all the time. So finding ways where you can leverage, and this is what PR is, leveraging other people's platforms to reach their audience. And so that means getting, features in local newspapers. It means partnering with other local small businesses. So then you guys can cross brand and share each other on your social media pages or on your websites. And you can partner up and do some really cool things together and collaborate. And so that's another great way to get some free PR as well. And something that I've worked on with Marsha and with some of our authors is if you're a subject matter expert in a topic, you can, submit requests to appear on people's podcasts, right, for their blogs. and find a way to really get yourself in front of all these different audiences that may be interested in your product or service. So those would be my 3 recommendations.
That sounds awesome. So I know that you are doing that right now by appearing right here. You are getting your brand out there. This is your personal brand as well as Burning Soul Press's brand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's major. Now, one of the challenges that I see with small businesses is that they say, I'm not on social media. Do I have to get on all of them at the same time? What would your advice be?
That's a good question. And I think that it ultimately depends on your audience and the customers that you're trying to reach. Now, if it's going to be overwhelming to be on every single platform, don't do it. I don't want anyone to feel that they have to stretch themselves so thin. But what I would do is do a little bit of research and find out what platforms your customers are on. And unfortunately, sometimes it's a platform you're not super comfortable with, like Instagram, or maybe it's Twitter. So I would definitely do the research to find out where your customers are going to be, your potential customers, and focus on that channel first, or maybe 2. And I think that would be the best way to get started in social media. And once you have a couple platforms running, it doesn't feel as daunting to have more.
Right. So it may be wise to start with fewer, establish yourself there, get comfortable with the routine, and then expand to 1 more if you want.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Especially if you're small, I'm guessing, because then the funds are limited, the help is limited. You're a one-man show or a very small team. And so you need to do it in bite-sized approach, because you don't want to do it poorly all over. Do it well in one place.
Correct. Yeah,
that's good advice. I wish that I had realized that in the very beginning, because in the very beginning, it's very overwhelming, right? You don't know very much and you're trying to be all things to all people, and it's not a good way to start.
Correct. And it is good to be on as many social platforms as you can be, ultimately, because that's just another way for people to find you and your business or your service. So, or your book, in Marsha's case. So I do recommend trying to get there at some point, but like you said, Marsha, don't overwhelm yourself. And something that I definitely recommend everyone works hard to avoid is burnout, because that is the worst. We've all hit it and no one likes it. So that's another way to avoid it.
So have you had to deal with burnout, Allison?
Absolutely, Marsha. So much. And the thing is, when I've told people that I'm in a period where I'm very burned out, and I've hit a low point in my burnout. A lot of folks that I've worked with, and a lot of times they're older than me, they're like, you're 27, or at the time 26 or 25, like, you shouldn't be reaching burnout. You have so much energy. Like, what do you mean? But I've always been on the side of being a little too ambitious. So a lot of the things that I've accomplished, I'm very proud of, but I used to take on too much all the time, and I struggled to say no. And so that's something I've been working on recently to avoid getting burned out, because I would have my full-time job for years. I always had a side hustle. So I always had a part-time job on the side that was up to 20 hours a week. And in addition, I've been highly involved with AWC, the Association for Women in Communications that Marsha mentioned earlier, that takes up a lot of time when you're in a leadership position of a national organization. And so with all of those things, and then other little things that pop up and little projects, it gets really overwhelming, and I would have to take some time. And so something that, what I thought was the fix was, you work really hard, and then when you hit burnout, you take some time off, you take a break. And that's really not the best way to handle burnout. You need to incorporate balance into your life all the time so that you never hit burnout. And I didn't realize that until a little bit earlier this year. I was working for Comcast and working for Burning Soul Press on the side. And I was so passionate about Burning Soul Press, I was maxing out my hours and going over 20 hours a week most weeks, on top of my 40 hours at my job, and still being extremely involved in AWC, as well as the Emerging Leaders Program with the chamber at the time. And I hit a very low point, and I was thinking to myself, I cannot continue to work 2 jobs and hold leadership positions in organizations anymore. And so I had to make some hard choices, and I had some good, transparent conversations with Lauren at Burning Soul Press. And we ultimately made the decision that it was a good time, and I'm lucky that the timing worked out for me to come on full-time at Burning Soul Press. And at this point, I don't need to have a part-time job. So I am doing so much better with that. But that has been my strategy now to avoid burnout. But burnout has been an issue that I have struggled with in cyclical, like, I don't know, it's just been a mess. So I'm very glad to have finally righted it. But I feel that I experienced burnout and had such a problem with burnout at a much younger age than a lot of people that I know, because I just never invest my time.
I'm suspecting that maybe more of our young people are going that way because so much is being asked of them. And also because your generation seems to live in multitask mode. That's just me as a teacher observing.
I'd say you're right.
And when you multitask, my son is on 3 devices at a time. I have no idea how he does it. I'm like, son, you can only read a book or study a subject. Why is it that 3 devices are on? He says, Mom, I'm doing them all, just, back off. I think in the same way that when I was young, my parents couldn't figure out how to put the video cassette recorder on, and we had that skill. Now, I mean, you all are way advanced from where we were, but we were a step ahead of the generation before. And now your step ahead is this ability to multitask. So one of the things I used to teach in a time management course that I did was that we cannot multitask. Humans are not able to multitask. You can only do one thing at a time. And I'm questioning if that is still the same, or if for your generation that actually has shifted. And I know enough about the way we evolve to say, okay, so what's true for your generation does not have to be true for the next. So, hold back on your judgment and don't paint everybody with the same brush. I suspect that because you all are juggling so many things at the same time and trying to do the job and trying to run this race to get into the higher positions, because that's sort of what I'm hearing over and over. I want to get there. I don't want to be down here in nobody land. That's what I've heard from so many of my students. You put more pressure on yourself. And because you're doing that without realizing it, you are compromising that balance that you talked about.
Yeah.
When in fact, the true secret is to carve out space for joy and fulfillment every day.
Yes.
Because you deserve to enjoy your life. So that's a major one. And I'm going to end our chat in a while by asking you about some tips for how to do that.
Okay.
Because you of all people, I think, have some golden tips for us because of your range of experiences. But I don't want to really end the meat of our interview, which is to talk about that communications and PR expertise that you have, because it is called the Changemaker series. And so I want to learn a little bit about you. From that context of communications and PR, what would you say might be one of the biggest stories or experiences that you had where your communications and PR really helped a client or a business to shine?
Okay.
And how can we learn from that?
That is a great question. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory. Okay.
Sure.
So it has to do with the Association for Women in Communications. I got involved with the association when I was in college. So as a sophomore, I went to one of their national conferences, and I didn't join as a member until after that point. And then when I got back to campus, we had a professional chapter there in the same town. So I joined their chapter, And then I started a student chapter on campus. And so I was the president and founder of that chapter, which is still going today, which is very cool. And then as a senior in college, I joined the National Board of Directors. So I was their youngest ever director on the national board. And I stepped in initially as a student outreach committee chair to help strengthen the tie between our student chapters and national, which was awesome. And that experience really helped me to see, how can we communicate our benefits to members, and how can we really get the message out there that this organization is helpful to women in the field of communications. And so after being the student outreach committee chair and setting that up, I moved on to co-chair the marketing communications committee. And at that point in time, we didn't have a presence on social media very much. And, well, we had a presence, but we weren't consistent in putting out content. So through AWC and being the chair, I mean, we got to really strategically plan how we're going to get our message out there and better than ever before, because a lot of associations have experienced this drop in membership over the past decade. And AWC has definitely been a part of that. And so we've just started turning around our numbers, but it takes time. And I don't want to get too much into the association side of it, but we ended up developing a consistent social media strategy that we could apply over time. We worked with an advertising agency to put together a brand new brand for us. So we rolled out a brand new brand that really resonated with the people we were trying to reach, our prospective members. And we also started a blog so that we could get the voices of our members out there in the world so that people could see and read their words and their expertise and their experiences and say, I relate to that, I want to join. And so those are some of the things that we did, and it had a huge impact. Our retention rates are up, and we've seen a lot more success in our membership drives than we have in years past. So I would say that would be one of the biggest, PR experiences, marketing experiences, where I got to see my impact directly benefiting my association. And the funniest thing about it is it was 100% volunteer work. We don't get paid to be on the board. And while I do put it on my resume, it doesn't exist underneath a job description because it wasn't a job. It's a volunteer thing. So, I really feel that jumping into those kinds of opportunities can really help improve your own skills and make you a better prospective employee for someone as well, for your students.
I'm betting that it also makes you more visible because everybody in the organization knows you and knows your impact and knows how wonderful your ideas are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, especially for younger people who say, I don't have a whole lot of work experience, to get out there and get that experience, even if you're not paid for it.
Yeah. And I've gotten through AWC, just having a network in this organization, I've gotten 2 jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. So your network is really important, and the way you present yourself and the work that you put in, it's all a representation of you. So, what you're saying, Marcia, is spot on.
Wow. So that's big, because communications and PR doesn't only work to help the business to grow, it helps the individual as well. And one last question that I have is, some people feel that for them to do social media well, they have to be putting out posts 10 times a day. To me, that might overwhelm their followers. So, and doing it too infrequently also is not the right thing. So how frequent is good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the biggest thing is to be consistent. What we do at Burning Soul Press is we post about 3 times a week, generally Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It works best for us. We follow the trends on when our audience, you can see this in Facebook Insights, but you can see when the majority of the people who follow you and like your page are online. So you can even test out the time of day that you post that way, which is really incredible. So yeah, but for the frequency, I would say 2 to 3 posts per week. It does not have to be crazy. And something that I recommend doing is having, I would say 70 to 80% of your posts for the week scheduled out, where you know kind of what you're going to do. So you have a plan. But then you still let about 30% be organic and something that you decide to share in the moment, so that you're not coming off as inauthentic or too scheduled or strategized. But you don't have to do so much of the work all the time, and you can save time that way.
Yeah. And what about figuring out what kinds of posts have the most impact for you? Like, would talking about current affairs really be your thing, or would videos from you really touch your followers more? How would you find that on Insights as well?
Yeah, so you can definitely see using Insights how much each post is really making an impact by seeing how many people are engaging with it, how many people view it, things like that. And you can do a little bit of research on your own to see, the kind of audience that you're trying to reach and maybe what might resonate most with them. But the best way to really find out is to test it out and to try a couple different things. So definitely recommend trying video, doing Facebook Lives, doing pictures. And I recommend, of course, with every post on like every platform, including a picture at least. But you'll get to see the kinds of engagement that you get with each type of post. And you can even vary, are you going to ask a question to get engagement? Do you want people to be engaging with your post with questions and comments and answers? Do you want to share something educational? And you can alternate that throughout. So
that's wonderful. So viewers, I hope that you have gotten lots of tips that you can now take back to build your personal brand, even if you don't have a business, or to help your business get seen more and get followed more and draw business in. So Allison, before we wrap up, there's one thing that I always like to ask, and that is related to that joy and fulfillment. A lot of people say that I'll feel happy when I get that certificate, when I get vacation, when I get married, when some big event happens. And delaying our happiness is one of the ways that we put more stress on ourselves and that we sacrifice our life balance in the now. And really, you are not guaranteed that you will get that happiness. And that happiness is going to be fleeting, because the second you get the certificate, your mind is already on what the other hill is to climb. So when it comes to you, what would your 3 top tips be for how to deal with your obstacles in life in such a way that you can claim more joy and fulfillment every day?
Absolutely. So I think the first tip that I have for that would be to check in with yourself. I think oftentimes there is so much going on with our lives, we forget to ask ourselves, are we happy? Do I enjoy doing what I'm doing in various aspects of life? And, do I like the direction I'm going in? And really just checking in with yourself. And that can be something where it's day to day. Am I stressed today? Am I happy today? Am I, kind of on edge today? Doing that regularly helps you get to know yourself better and what you need or don't need. Another recommendation or another tip that I would give, and this is for, really making sure that you're finding that joy, is asking yourself, getting to the bottom of what does make you happy, really, truly. And, I'm really introverted, but I love spending time with my friends. But I definitely need to balance that out with time alone. And so, I'd have all of this work stuff going on, and then I'd feel guilty that I'm not spending enough time with my friends and on my interpersonal relationships. And so all my extra time outside of my intense work demands was spent trying to feed into my friends. So at the end, there was no time left over for me. And so, I had to say, being with friends makes me happy, but having time by myself sometimes makes me happier. And I just have to accept that and set boundaries with my friends on my time. And so that's a little bit more on the personal side, but it definitely made an impact in my life. And then the third thing for finding joy and fulfillment, I would say, and Marcia, you've touched on this several times, so I don't necessarily want to take your tip, but definitely setting aside time for yourself every day that is intentionally to make you happy. So one thing that I do every day for myself to make sure that I'm getting what I need is I like to go on about a 30-minute walk every morning. That is time I spend with myself. I'll listen to a news podcast in the morning or an audiobook that I'm trying to read. So I'll put on an audiobook, or sometimes I'll just listen to music if I just don't want to have words going into my brain. And so it's just that time for myself. And I always come back from that walk feeling so ready for my day. But that can look different for everyone. It can be getting a workout in. That's your intentional time. You're spending it just on yourself, only for your benefit. It can be waking up a little extra early in the morning to have a cup of coffee in silence before everyone else gets up. That can really, help start your day off right. It could be at the end of the day too, but just something intentional to help you feel like you're filling your bucket. So
Yeah.
those are my tips.
That's just the right tips. If only I could have known these things before, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So I think in our heart of hearts, we know that we need to give ourselves permission to pause and just heal and just focus on filling back up. And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So I just want to endorse those tips. They are wonderful tips. Let's all start doing them more consistently, because our lives are going to change because of it. And other people's lives are going to change because of it. Because when your cup is full, you have so much more to pour out.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Allison, it has been a lovely, lovely chat with you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your wealth of experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Marcia. This has been so fun.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Marcia. It's been great to speak with you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.